Hi everyone, Dr. Debbie Smers. Today we're going to talk about stress, what it's doing to your brain and adrenal glands. I'm going to make it a two-part series so that each little clip's only going to be about 5 minutes long. So let's talk about stress. What is stress? And is it really bad for you? No. Stress is an important part of life. It what gets you out of bed in the morning. We all need a little bit of eustress in our life, but it's distress that really causes issues. So it's when we get into this distress phase that we feel fatigued, exhausted, and we can eventually lead to burnout or can eventually lead to a breakdown or a burnout. So what is good health? To me, good health is the ability to balance. So when we think of the sympathetic system, and when we have a stressful situation, so we'll take the classic running from the bear. What happens is you should go into sympathetic overdrive. So now your adrenal glands, which we'll speak about in a moment, are pumping out all of the endocrine hormones that your body needs. Your brain is thinking what it has to do next. And so then we get away from the situation and we should go back into balance and eventually go into our parasympathetic system. And our parasympathetic system is necessary for rebalancing and recovering and repair. So let's start by talking about your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are two little glands that sit on top of your kidneys and they help you deal with stress. So you can see from the slide, there's many different functions the adrenal glands focus on. I could talk about just this alone for at least an hour, but for simplicity's sake, let's think of it as the adrenal glands play a role in pain perception, your sex hormones, stress, water regulation, sugar regulation, excitement, and drive. So they're really important little glands, especially when it comes to dealing with stress. That's why naturopaths could talk about them for hours on end. So what's happening when you go into a stressful situation? So ideally, as we said, it should be a transient experience. So we go into the reactive phase, your body produces adrenaline and cortisol, you mobilize the sugar for what needs to happen so your body has the energy it needs to deal with it. We can run away from the bear. And then we should go into get out of our reactive phase and be able to deal with it. What happens with chronic stress is our body constantly is to be exposed to cortisol, and we get into this adaptive phase. If you watched my last video, we talked a little bit about the cell danger response. So your cell danger response occurs when your cell thinks it's under attack. So stress, constant stress, makes the adrenal glands think we're under constant attack. We get this high cortisol, and we start to see negative changes in the body. So one of them is we start to see an increase of calcium loss from the bones. So this could lead to osteoporosis. Fat deposits get put into different places. So typically when it comes to stress weight, we'll see it on the bottom of the arms and around the stomach. Insulin resistance. So the body says, hey, don't touch that sugar anymore. That's needed for something else. So now insulin doesn't pick up the sugar and we can become insulin resistant and more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. We see changes in thyroid production. Thyroid is in a gland on your little gland that's right on your neck, and it helps you deal with metabolism and temperature. It works very closely with your adrenal glands and your body's reaction to stress. So after constant stress for a certain period of time, we almost always see the thyroid go and vice versa. So if you're on thyroid medication, I strongly suggest you think about supporting your adrenal glands as well. And finally, we're going to see changes in your immune system. And eventually, we see just exhaustion. We'll talk about all of the changes that go on in the brain later, but what are some of the things that you should look for? Well, if you know me at all, you know that I look at inflammation as one of our enemies. So chronic stress is going to lead to inflammation in the body, which leads to everything, pretty much all chronic disease, from diabetes to hypertension to autoimmune disease. We're going to see a change in your hormones. We know that the adrenal glands help us with the hormone production. So you're going to see a change in estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, changes in thyroid. So more likely to get a hypothyroid functioning state, though sometimes we see a transient hyper, which can go to hypo. There's more of an inability to deal with stress. We see fatigue, anxiety. So some of the things that you should really be looking for are those feelings of anxiety and apprehension, headaches, irritability, especially when you miss a meal, because we're seeing that changes in the way the body deals with sugar. Carbohydrate cravings, fatigue, depression, and an inability to lose weight. In my clinic, we do something called the Konigsberg test, which is sort of a quick and fast little way to see if the adrenal glands may be off in some way. Should we get more testing done? So that's sort of a little snapshot of what's happening when you're dealing with stress. So here's showing us more of This hyperactive state often is hard to know if you're in hyper or hypoactive state because nothing's quite as black and white as well. But you can take a screenshot of this and you can see just some of the different states the body is at. So that's what's happening from an adrenal gland, mainly adrenal gland point of view when we're dealing with stress. So if you want to watch my next video, we'll talk a little bit about stress and your brain.